The 2025 International Colloquium Series Europe is sponsored by Union Theological Seminary in the City of New York, the Episcopal Diocese of California, King's College London, Regent's Park College, University of Oxford, the Center for Black Theology at Regent's Park College, Oxford, the Protestant Theological Institute of Paris, and in partnership with the Cathedral Church of the Holy Trinity, the American Cathedral in Paris.
The Northern California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation is dedicated to promoting justice, health, education, and service. Please consider making a donation at NorcalMLKFoundation.org. Every donation makes a difference.
Maintenant, je donne la parole à Dwight Hopkins, qui est le professeur à l'université de Chicago, la chaire Laura Spelman Rockefeller, et son exposé, qui est en train de se distribuer en traduction française et qu'il donnera en anglais, s'intitule « Foi, richesse, liberté ». Une espérance pour les gens de la classe laborieuse aux États-Unis. Why, thank you very much. Oh, yes, that could help. Indeed. Oh, did you? Yes, I guess it's enough. It says that in French. It takes so much time to speak it in English and French.
Good morning. It's good to be here, and I want to add, as Aaron has already indicated, our warm hearts and our bodies full of spirit and energy connecting the United States with France. We are all closet Francophones, so we feel very much at home.
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about faith plus wealth equals freedom, and you have a copy. I sent it a longer copy, but I'm going to do a shorter paper because of time, and I'm not sure which paper was translated, but you actually may have the longer. So let us begin. This paper is concerned about the following question: how is it possible for poor and working class people of the United States of America to live a life of freedom? Here, freedom means not owing anything or anyone anything, so one can freely practice daily his or her purpose on earth. How is it possible for poor and working class people of the United States of America to live a life of freedom? Freedom means not owing anything or anyone anything, so one can freely practice daily his or her purpose on earth. I argue that faith plus wealth equals freedom answers this question. Wealth denotes earth, air, and water, and perfect balance of life energy inside of our bodies. Therefore, wealth has a material and a spiritual component. And faith for Christians embodies the Jesus stories, and for others, an ultimate concern beyond the individual self. The paper will touch on 5 theses to substantiate this claim that faith plus wealth equals freedom. And these themes draw from various sources, such as the Bible, my personal history, Black American experiences or Afro-American experiences, and business theory. By way of introduction, two things impact my research question and my combined theology and business response. First is my definition of Black liberation theology. Black liberation theology means starting with the liberation message of Jesus and discerning how that liberation is revealed in theology and in Black American experiences. In the phrase Black theology of liberation, the leading factor, the word that defines the rest of the phrase, the word that adjudicates the other two, and the word that asks, have we been faithful to our calling? The main word is the Jesus story of liberation. And so my Black liberation theology begins with the Jesus parables about liberation that anchor my research and way of living. Without me first clarifying the Jesus stories, my understanding of Black and theology, the two other words in the phrase Black liberation theology, is stunted. Several Jesus stories give substance to Jesus' sense of his own vocation and how he defined the vocation of all humankind. First is Luke chapter 4, verses 16 through 21. And one can argue that this is the only place where Jesus offers us his self-understanding of why he is on earth. Indeed, this is his first public presentation. In a sense, it is the proclamation of why he walks and talks on earth. Thus, it is the first word of God's own self-understanding. It is the inaugural state of the cosmos speech. And what is this first annunciation explaining why Jesus came to earth? Quoting Luke 4, he went to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. Unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because it has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. It has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then Jesus rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Close quote. So we must remember that the year of the Lord's favor refers to the book of Leviticus in chapter 25, a period of God's favor and blessing for the poor and oppressed. Furthermore, this phrase is associated with the year of Jubilee, denoting a period of debt forgiveness, land restitution, and freedom from physical slavery. The thread here is liberation of working people, the poor and the oppressed. And the remedy is freedom from debt, the end of physical slavery, and the return of land to people. Land restitution brings access to air, and ideally water. Land, air, and water, and all things derived from them constitute wealth. Moreover, the Jesus story of granting gold to different servants as an investment opportunity to multiply wealth exhibits and thereby broadens our understanding of the human vocation. We find this in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 21. The point of this story is to answer, what would Jesus have his followers do with abundant resources right in front of them? What attitude should they take toward capital and return on investment in a Christian framing of accumulation and allocation of capital? In brief, what is the fundamental relation between Jesus' proclamation of spiritual and material freedom on the one hand, and Jesus' imperative to realize outside returns on initial investments on the other? Matthew 25 reads as follows. "Again, it would be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness, close quote. As we keep in mind the earlier Luke chapter 4 parable, this Matthew 25 Jesus story suggests the importance of learning from business schools, Wall Street, and Silicon Valley. Specifically, we pinpoint the necessity or vocational call for working class and poor people to intentionally make wealth work for them. For instance, this Matthew 25 passage offers the following lessons. 1, don't hoard wealth, rather use it to multiply wealth. 2, financial literacy is key to this process, which basically comprehends the art and science of investing. 3, one needs to learn business management. How does one organize the intricacies of an enterprise? 4, what role does marketing play? Marketing, the art of persuasion, is essential to multiplying wealth. 5, the dynamics of money flow hinge, to a large degree, on how wide one's relationships are to an ever-growing web of people relationships. 6, complementing this Matthew 25 story is another one of Jesus' instructions where he teaches us the following, quote, from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked, close quote. And 7, finally, and very importantly, wealth requires a deep grasp and nuanced practice of business ethics. Indeed, the best business ethics statement in the world is the Mansari's Oath of Ethical Investing. The foundational ethical themes here are integrity, excellence, fairness, equality, respect, transparency, confidentiality, and growth. In addition to my understanding of these Jesus stories, the second factor impacting my research question and my combined theology and business response is my personal journey, which, like the Jesus stories, connects faith and wealth as a condition for practicing freedom. My family genealogy goes back 5 generations in the state of Virginia in the United States and interweaves church participation and belief in the Jesus stories with business ownership. I am the 6th generation with 3 additional generations since my birth, thus constituting 9 generations of the Hopkins family in Virginia, and Dwight N. Hopkins II is the 7th generation, my son, on his iPad there. Though the dominant Hopkins Christian institution was Baptist, the Episcopal church culture molded worship and belief due to the ever-present Episcopalian heritage handed down since the founding of the Virginia colony by England in 1607. If you have the larger or longer essay, I probably have about 4 or 5 other paragraphs, but I curtailed it for this conversation. And now we jump to this next subheading, Faith plus Wealth equals Freedom, 5 Theses. C'est bon? Even though we have analyzed Bible interpretation and my personal story, we still can question the foundation of this paper. Is the argument of faith plus wealth equals freedom really clear, cogent, and compelling? To engage in such a conversation requires at least the exploration of the 5 theses that deny such a conceptual and practical formulation. So before I discuss my own constructive statement and answer my own question, I want to look at 5 theses that deny my argument. To recap, my research project focuses on faith plus wealth equals freedom and draws on academic sources from the Black religious tradition and business theory. my argument is the following. To achieve freedom for American citizens locked out of opportunities, we need to broaden ownership of wealth in the United States of America while believing in a power greater than an individual. This applies specifically to working class and poor and Black Americans. At first glance, this line of thinking might seem a false juxtaposition or non sequitur. Counterclaim objections and, in fact, denials of this argument can be raised from at least 5 perspectives. Counterclaim challenges attempt to persuade us of the incompatibility of yoking together faith plus wealth as a precondition for freedom. First of the 5 counterclaims. First is a religious counterclaim thesis. It asserts that the history of the Black American religious tradition has created a narrative positioning the first Africans brought to the 13 colonies as victims of a 1619 Jamestown, Virginia settler Christian colony. Such a colonial Christianity, the thesis advances, was capitalist, or moving across the threshold from semi-feudal land ownership to capitalism. Thus, since capitalist Christianity of the slave master set the conditions for the birth of Black religion as its own Black religion has to draw on its own sources to forge a constructive Black religion. One of those sources cannot be a private ownership of wealth Christianity. Black religion itself cannot, this counterclaim argues, Black religion itself cannot utilize that negative system that partially provided the motivation for its creation. Consequently, the religious counterclaim posits that Black religion, at its core, is anti-private ownership of wealth. To be its own originality, Black religion dispenses with capitalist accumulation of wealth, or any dimension of the capitalist religion that exploited it. By this logical definition, Black religion is incompatible with the notion of faith plus wealth equals freedom. The second is a Christian biblical counterclaim. Those who argue this stance paraphrase passages from the Bible where they discover the following injunction from Paul: money is the root of all evil, which is an interpretation of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. Therefore, if the sacred text of the Christian tradition clearly defines money as the foundation of evil, then theologically and faith-wise, one cannot put together faith plus wealth to equal freedom for Christians. On the contrary, private ownership of wealth is to engage in evil, not freedom. This interpretation of Paul's injunction appears to point to the very root of biblical instruction. Thus, if the Bible so clearly warrants an avoidance of the danger of money, Christians of any persuasion must tear asunder any faith-wealth interaction. Not freedom, but sin can result from such a lack of disconnection. The third is a business theory counterclaim. Writing in a 1970 New York Times article, Milton Friedman, the famous University of Chicago economist known for the Chicago School of Economics, declared that the sole purpose of a capitalist company is to make profits for its shareholders, those who own the wealth of the business. For a corporation to engage in social impact or social justice, which from my analysis falls under freedom, if they engage in these things, the corporation is engaging in socialism. Friedman was not a stereotypical Ed Heck theorizing abstractly in Hyde Park, Illinois, the neighborhood of the University of Chicago. He became advisor to President Ronald Reagan and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. From a business school perspective, we cannot marry profit-making with religion or freedom or social justice. The very idea and function of a capitalist enterprise collapses into socialism in the United States if the goal of said enterprise is not strictly and only maximizing profit. Furthermore, when investors give their money to a company and the managers of that company don't singularly and rigidly pursue huge returns on investment, they betray their fiduciary obligations. In a word, they have broken the relation of trust between the investors and the managers of that wealth investment. Hence, faith, broadly construed as social doing good. Faith, always, without exception, stands sharply over against wealth maximization. The fourth is an economic theory counterclaim. Karl Marx stated that capitalism was inherently exploitative of the working class and other sectors of society who were the most distant from private ownership of wealth or capital. So too, he stated that religion or faith is the opiate of the people, especially the working class and poor in all societies. If capitalism is exploitation and religion is a debilitating drug, then we cannot have faith plus wealth equals freedom, because it contradicts the research and conceptual framework of Karl Marx. Marx substantiated his global conclusion by immersing himself in meticulous archival work, as well as contemporary observations of European working classes. And fifth, and finally, is a worldview outlook counterclaim. It sees a world where all Black American citizens, Afro-Americans, are victims of an oppressive system. Because of this origin myth, Blacks appear hermetically sealed within white supremacy capitalism. Consequently, one cannot think about freedom because the underlying presupposition of this origin myth is perpetually reacting and fighting against an ever-present white normativity. To talk about Black people in North America is to begin always with how white racism has permanently, always already ensnared this total Black population, Afro-Americans, in an intersectional, never-ending state of reactivity and victimology. When we look at Black Americans, Afro-Americans, we see victims. If one begins with victimhood and lacking agency, then one cannot realize faith plus wealth equals freedom, which is based on agency. My faith plus wealth equals freedom argument refutes these counterclaims by offering a positive view of Africans and Blacks in the 13 colonies and subsequent United States nation. And I document conceptually and practically how private ownership of wealth, religion, and doing good go together. First, from the arrival of the first group of enslaved Africans through the creation of Black Americans until today, Afro-Americans, the Black religious tradition has always provided examples of how Black private ownership of wealth was compatible with Christianity. The role of Black businesses in the 1950s and 1960s civil rights movement is a case in point. Black businesses provided the hotels, the restaurants, church buildings, and Black-owned taxis that sustained that movement. Likewise, the last speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. embodied his broadening into the analytics of class analysis of Black ownership of wealth as an additional phase in the struggle for freedom. For instance, on the night of April 3rd, 1968, the day before he was assassinated, King preached his final sermon in Memphis, Tennessee. And here's an excerpt. He says, "And that's all this whole thing is about. We aren't engaged in any negative protest and in any negative arguments with anybody. We are saying that we are determined to be men. We are determined to be people. We are saying that we are God's children, and that we are God's children, we don't have to live like we are forced to live. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. But deposit your money in a Black-owned bank. Go by the Black-owned Savings and Loan Association. Put your money there. You have 6 or 7 Black insurance companies here in the city of Memphis. Now we begin the process of building an economic base." Close quote. Second, in addition to a legacy combining wealth with Black religion, there is a long history of Black Americans having agency and a proactive posture resulting from employing private ownership of capital to move their families and communities into freedom. During slavery, Black millionaires are exemplified by Free Frank, Jeremiah G. Hamilton, William Ellison, and Joseph Wilson. Post-slavery, we encounter Maggie Lena Walker, the first woman in the United States to start a bank. She happened to be a Black American from Richmond, Virginia. The first contemporary Black multimillionaire was Reginald F. Lewis. And today, Black Americans have entered the billionaire ranks led by David Stewart and Robert F. Smith. What they and others have in common as viewing the United States as a place to exercise agency and obtain almost endless resources for their families and others wanting a better life. Indeed, they sought intentionally to lift up the Black race as they climbed the wealth ladder. Third, faith derives from the biblical stories. Specifically, Paul does not say money is the root of all evil. He preaches that the love or coveting of money is the root of all evil. And one could argue that most of Jesus' stories are about wealth, money, and material resources. Similarly, the Old Testament section of the Christian Bible centered on promised ownership of material land and material milk and honey, based on faith in God or power greater than the individual self. Fourth, scores of capitalist businesses are proving the viability of maximizing profits while carrying out social impact goals. We hear phrases such as purpose and profit, cause and capital, and mission and margin. This new movement is often designated as social entrepreneurship. In particular, various theoretical paradigms have emerged with evidence that the United States capitalism, in contrast to monopoly capitalism, can do good. Here are 5 models. 1, making money moral with sustainable investments and impact investments based on economic and social criteria. 2, growing the wealth pie in the United States by increasing the value of a company and the value of the economy so that all stakeholders benefit, especially those who lack wealth. 3, theorizing how to create a capitalism for the people based on supporting a healthy populism to make capitalism more competitive and less of a monopoly. 4, moving from plantation economics, i.e. a crony capitalism, to partnership economics, defined as a win-win outcome. And 5, saving the soul of a corporation by putting the corporation's resources at the service of its workers and the larger public in such a way that the spirit of the mission aligns with the values of its workers. And 5th, the neo-racism theory of Black American citizens, hermetically sealed within victimization, has to account for a major development in the United States. Today, the urban areas where Blacks are concentrated are now run not by whites, but by Black people in the legislative, education, police, executive, judicial, and nonprofit sectors. The city of Chicago exemplifies these data. In other words, Black power now governs the ghetto. Consequently, the Blacks are victims worldview has to account for Black people now ruling over urban America, where most Black people live. To sum up my remarks, faith plus wealth equals freedom is my argument. Here, wealth is defined as ownership of earth, air, and water. This is material wealth. Furthermore, wealth encompasses the balance and harmony of the life energy internal to our breathing. Such as spiritual wealth liberates us from the negative, emotional, addictive, and psychological constraints preventing us from practicing our purpose on earth. In the Jesus stories, mythological narratives reveal Jesus casting out demons possessing a man. Such aggressive demons upset the balance and harmony of the divine spirit in our bodies. They destroy our spiritual lives and our physical bodies. Faith remains, in my research, a life-giving belief in a power greater than one individual. Such a broad designation covers a variety of peoples. For Christians, it means the historical Jesus who walked this earth. Throughout his ministry, he promised deliverance for the imprisoned, the thirsty, the homeless, the hungry, and the oppressed. And he commanded us to utilize wealth as an abundance. Faith in such a figure keeps one on the path when one's orientation becomes clouded. It gives hope in all situations. And very, very importantly, it reminds one that ownership of wealth is guided by the notion of faith. Freedom denotes an ongoing process where a person does not owe anyone or anything anything. Then a person can devote 100% of her or his time to fulfill his or her earthly mission, their purpose or their calling. A case can be made that all or part of that vocation can include aiding those who are locked out of wealth ownership. Thus, a human vocation focuses on including them and their families in the earth, air, and water usage, and through meditation and prayer, facilitating the harmony and balance of their internal life energy spirit. For instance, some are called to give a hungry man and his family a fish. Some are called to give him a fishing pole so he can fish on his own. And some are called to help him own the company that makes the fishing rods and to support his nature process of balancing his inner life energy. This latter illustration dovetails with my argument, faith plus wealth equals freedom. as a vocation, and as a conceptual way of being in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dwight, for this thought-provoking proposal of what we might call an alternative narrative to the classical narrative of the black predicament as, what shall I say, ontological victimhood or something like that. Very thought-provoking, and I'm sure it will provoke now the discussion and other issues you have raised in your paper. I promised you didn't hear that because I said it in French. I was much too long in my comments on Aaron, so I promised that I will only translate now the questions and the responses, and now it is place for the questions from the floor. Donc voilà, vous avez la parole pour, j'ai promis que je ne ferai pas de commentaires, vous avez la parole pour des questions à nos deux orateurs de ce matin.
Cette partie ne va pas être enregistrée.
Oui.
C'est tout bon. Yeah. So now we are off the recording. We can really freely express ourselves.
And you edit it. So we are free to speak now, whatever we want to say. Well,
like many of us, you are probably concerned about is social Darwinism afoot. A recent Guardian article used the term soft eugenics, notably described the new Robert Kennedy Jr.'s abandonment of the germ theory, probably resulting in many deaths, notably in people of lower socioeconomic classes. And so I'd like both the speakers perhaps to address their points in the view of scarcity. Dr. Aaron, spoke of the importance of developing values and meanings, essential meanings with respect to direct experience. So if people are experiencing scarcity, whether it's people who are poor or the wealthy technocrats who consider that the best thing for the world is zero population growth, which might indeed mean let's do what we can to reduce populations. If Bangladesh is flooded, so much the better. And also with respect to handing out fishing poles to many people. If there are not enough, in fact, we don't have abundant resources, how does that affect your comment? I'm just throwing out some language, and you can bounce off that as you wish.
Okay, so perhaps you... I will translate the whole thing at the end, question and answer.
Thank you for your question. I think it's a very, very apt one in today's in our environment today. With respect to scarcity, the idea of scarcity is fraught with contradictions. And I live in San Francisco, California, which is one of the wealthiest places on the planet, and we waste more stuff than we consume. I live in, personally, my wife and I live in Marin County, which is a wealthy part of the world. There is a place not 10 minutes from where we live where the income the average income of the families that live there are perhaps 1% of the average income of residents in that county. So need and distribution of need and the way in which need is defined and distributed is conflicted, because the resources are there to meet the need. And my personal thought is, and you Texas and this measles situation is a case in point. We have an issue where the determination of what scarcity is not globally held. And without the voice of those who are impacted by actions that are taken, without the voice, we don't have a real way of understanding what scarcity is, what abundance is, what fulfillment of need is. We don't have a good way to gauge the meaning of that, because all representative voices are not at the table. And so we have found, and we've talked about this on our journey here, while we've been across the pond and while we've been in my favorite city in the world, which is your favorite city. We have talked about how Black mothers in the United States, single moms, can care for their children effortlessly in the face of stark need. How they can just do it. And Dr. White spoke to us a few days ago about how the beauty in that. There is an aesthetic beauty in the doing of an activity. Watching a mother or watching a Black woman, an African American woman, do the everyday with poise and with grace in the face of stark oppression, and to do it with a type of art that is literally beautiful. In the doing. Now we can all, with limited resources, now we can all take from that lessons from that, how one can do that so beautifully, so effortlessly, so efficiently. That meaning is not a part of the wider conversation. And that ability has not been mined in a way that could render benefit to the activities and the things that we, who may have resources, can learn from. That to me is an imbalance in how we look at the world. that to me is sort of a long answer to a very, very important question. But it's something that our leaders, well, I can't say that. That's not the right word. Because I didn't vote for those people.
There are no mics.
But it's something that we can learn from. Something that we can learn from. And learn from in a new way.
Yeah.
Just to take care about time, because now it will be almost impossible for the translator to translate.
No, it's okay. I mean,
and also, perhaps if we, I take care that we have a quarter hour before the lunchtime. Let us
make sure that we can have some other questions. Right.
So
Sure. Yeah.
So it's good to have short questions and short answers when possible.
We can move
Donc,
je disais que je me soucie du temps. Là, on a eu une très grande question très riche et une très grande réponse riche aussi. On peut aussi procéder par questions courtes et réponses courtes pour que plus d'entre nous puissent s'exprimer. Mais voilà. On a commencé en majesté là.
Non, mon ami Aaron parle pour moi.
That's short. Thank you, Dwight. Merci à vous deux. Donc, vous l'avez compris, je veux vraiment résumer. Ben, comme Frédéric l'a dit, c'est une question de grande actualité, mais d'une complexité dont les enjeux nous échappent en grande partie. Une question sur la rareté alléguée ou réelle des biens et de leur distribution, de leur répartition. C'est une question, enfin, parmi les différentes pistes proposées par Aaron, il y a l'idée qu'on peut trouver de réponse que si on écoute toutes les voix concernées, avec l'exemple des femmes noires qui, dans des situations d'extrême précarité, développent des modèles d'efficience, mais qui ne sont pas pris en compte dans le débat public. Voilà. C'est un résumé qui ne rend pas justice à la richesse de la discussion qui vient d'avoir lieu, mais je vous propose donc maintenant de redonner la parole à la salle. Et oui, peut-être plusieurs questions d'affilée.
Et aussi, on a tout de suite commencé, disons, par des questions plus au niveau de la discussion sur le fond, mais évidemment, s'il y a des questions plus de compréhension ou d'éléments qui vous manquent dans le puzzle et dans les architectures qui ont été proposées, commencez aussi par ces questions plus basiques, si jamais. Mais voilà.
Thank you both for your presentations. I have a question for Mr. Brazil. You said that the concept of justice can be understood as something that comes inherently from our human experiences, and from, if I understood correctly, even from nature itself, cooperation, communication, and not necessarily something that comes from top down. And it seems to me that there's a very interesting theological implication there, because there's a whole Christian tradition that considers that God is extra nos, that you know, and that what you said, I feel like it hints that we can also have an understanding of God maybe as linked to that justice that is inherent and not necessarily outside of our natures. Could you please elaborate, or what do you think of that?
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. If we hold that God created us, there is one thought that says that if we hold that God created us, created the human being, and we are created in the image of God, then we as human beings possess what we need to thrive as human beings, to be ready. And so there is an argument there. I think that Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King had this idea about the human being. Martin King believed that the human being was one created in the image of God, and there is a divine spark in all of us. And that divine spark, that spark that gives us life from above, enables us to relate to each other and to relate the best in each other. And from that vantage point, from that place, justice stems. We can this definition of justice as we stated, being specifically the confirmation and affirmation of freedom and dignity in one another, stems from that which is within all of us, that divine spark. And so it comes from, in the human place, it comes from within. It comes, as you had mentioned, from within. But it is sent, I'm going to say it this way, it is sent from above, right? Sent, but it comes from us. It comes through and out of us, but it is sent from a place that is not our own making. It comes from somewhere else. And I think that is probably the closest I can get. So I'm a son of ministers and preachers. And so I talk a lot. And so I do apologize in advance.
Just to add on, I think that a couple of things, Aaron's already laid it out, but I think some of us are working on this idea of co-constitution of the human self.
Mm-hmm.
That's the broader category. And we see that with the divine spark, which to me would be from the basis of creation. We also see it from the pneumatology, from the presence of the Holy Spirit. We see it there. And we also see it in the covenants that God is working with us. So from the creation perspective, God is never absent if God has created us. And if Jesus sends the Holy Spirit, God is with us. So it's not coming from above. And the covenants are material examples of working together. And then, so from various sources, creation, Holy Spirit, pneumatology, as well as the covenant. But there's also a history of Black folk culture. And there's a saying that says, God will make a way out of no way. But God helps those who help themselves. And so even from Black folk history, Black Christianity, we see not from above, but working together to co-constitute the self.
Oui, je veux juste dire quelques mots pour... vous m'entendez? Oui. D'accord. Alors, très rapidement, parce que je crois que tout le monde suit à peu près la conversation en anglais, à la question, est-ce que cette conception de la justice qui part du bas pour aller vers le haut plutôt que l'inverse, est-ce qu'elle a des résonances théologiques et bibliques? Et la réponse, vous l'avez compris, elle est bien évidemment oui, dans le thème de l'étincelle divine, de la création, de l'alliance, voilà. Donc juste pour résumer en quelques mots la teneur de la discussion qui vient d'avoir lieu. Et maintenant, question suivante.
So, my question is also linked with the former question, is that we could not talk about justice without talking about community. So just as you have started your paper, the sense of community, the sense of being together, more than just the fact that we are interconnected or interreality, we have behind or in the ground this conception of community first. So my question is, we cannot talk about the black experience or our black studies without this sense of community. It's something very essential, I could say. But, so for my question, how could you think about the individual in the center of this community? Should I have this risk that the community could take away the individual part of us? Is not so too big. I don't know if you catch what I have to say. If you always think about community, always this background that is so black people, our DNA. What is it so in this modern world where we have this sense of the individual, so this individualistic view of the person, and when we talk also about justice?
That's a wonderful question. That is a so there are two things, and there is a reformist individualism coming from a reformed tradition, but in my work, when I think about the individual aspect, it has to do with the concrete. It has to do with concrete experience in this way. In the transatlantic slave trade, two things happened. One thing happened on that boat that denoted or that identified two things. One is that every person individually who came on that boat experienced the loss of family, the loss of their name. They experienced loneliness. They did not know where they were going. They were locked in chains in these small little boxes and mashed together. So they had, each individual person experienced this trauma. And from that individual, from that experience, each person had to find a way to maintain their being. It was an existential activity that they had no choice but to go through if they wanted to survive. So it was an individual, it was something that each person had to go through. But it also was a collective and community thing, because every person had to go through the same type of experience. And as a result of having to go through that same type of experience, all of these persons could talk about it, relate to each other, what happened to them. It was like a social marker that caused us to be able to relate to each other and form a very interesting community all throughout the entire Atlantic world. Give you one example. One of our colleagues, her name is Dr. Rachel Harding. She is a professor in the United States, but she is a practitioner of candomblé in Brazil. So she did an experiment. She took a recording of a church service from an African American church, preaching, singing. She took it to Brazil to play for her colleagues and friends in the candomblé community in Brazil. They listened to the recording and they jumped up and told her this service or this recording is exactly the same as what we do. Not Christian, they don't totally different. But it's the same thing. You know? It's a relatedness. They didn't know it's a relatedness that stems from, this is my argument, that has its beginnings in the bottom of that boat. This form of terrorizing absence that every individual had to go through. So there was individualism, but then the fact of this experience that everyone had to go through created a form of community that everyone can then connect with, and their children could connect with, and their children's children. So it becomes something that we can all relate to, whether one was Christian, whether one was Candomblé or Santeria in Cuba. It's all related. That's one idea that is different from how individualism in our Western thought was created. This is an individualism that results in community.
Dwight, do you agree with your friend?
Yes.
Great. We are actually running out of time, as you noticed, but we will have still time this afternoon to discuss with two other papers, and of course there will be opportunities to have questions that go back to issues of this morning. We will feel totally free to do that together, but for now I think it is time for the break. See you at 2 o'clock, and from 2 to 4 we have this other session. Did I forget? Ah oui, j'ai pas traduit là. Bon, donc je disais, on arrive au bout du temps qu'on a pour ce matin, parce qu'il faut qu'on ait le temps de se restaurer pour se retrouver à 2 heures tout à l'heure. Donc là aussi, très rapidement, une discussion très, très riche, juste en 2 mots. Donc la question partait du constat que si on ne part pas de la justice, mais de la communauté, quel est le rôle de l'individu de manière générale et plus particulièrement dans l'expérience noire, et Aaron a souligné une sorte de paradigme historique dans l'expérience noire de la traversée de l'Atlantique, qui était à la fois une expérience individuelle et une expérience collective. Voilà, merci beaucoup à nos 2 amateurs de ce matin. Bon appétit. That sounds well in English too, so I don't have to translate that word.
No, you don't.
toujours ça.
The International Colloquium Series, confronting global issues with moral clarity and intellectual depth.